Hello, my name is Louis Greenbaum, and I'm a member of the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem Board of Directors. I've been fortunate to be a part of this vital organization since 1991. Established in 1986, the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem's mission is to serve as the Canadian representative of the Jerusalem-based Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center, by disseminating the universal lessons of the Holocaust across Canada through commemorative and educational activities. Beginning in 1993, the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem, in collaboration with the Government of Ontario, organized a meaningful annual event paying tribute to Holocaust survivors who rebuilt their lives in Ontario after the war and made significant contributions to the province. I'm proud to share that my father, Morris Greenbaum, Zichron Livracha, was in the very first cohort of Holocaust survivors recognized for their resiliency and impact on this province in 1993. Both my parents were born in 1931 in Poland, and save for my father's older sister and my mother's older brother, who later married, they lost their entire families in the Shoah. The four of them, on the run and in hiding, survived together under terrible conditions. Thankfully, for the last 9 months of the war, they were hidden by a Polish family who risked their lives until liberated by the Russian army in 1945. Our family has since ensured their rescuers be designated as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem in Israel and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. My parents arrived as immigrants at Canada's Pier 21 in Halifax in November 1948 with nothing, and subsequently sponsored my aunt and uncle to come to Canada. Here in Ontario, they grew their family and built successful, meaningful, and loving lives together. It is a privilege to acknowledge the outstanding contributions of the Holocaust survivors who came to a new country with nothing and worked to leave an indelible mark on the province of Ontario. The opportunity to partner with the Ontario government has been a unique one in which we can rely on our provincial government to provide for the highest form of respect towards the lives that were built by these Holocaust survivors.
Hi, it's a privilege and an honor to join you all in reflecting on the achievements of Holocaust survivors in Ontario. Following the Holocaust, many survivors came to Canada, made Ontario their home, found success, and contributed greatly to the province we all know and love. I want to recognize the hundreds of survivors who have been honored in everything they have achieved and built to make Ontario the best place to live, work, and raise a family. Here in Ontario, we will always stand up against racism, hate, and discrimination, including anti-Semitism. Thank you to the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem for always keeping survivors front of mind and for the work you do to acknowledge everything they have achieved while rebuilding their lives in Ontario. I'm wishing you all the very best for this moving tribute.
Today, on behalf of the State of Israel, I honor and pay tribute to the 300 previous honorees, Holocaust survivors who came out of the inferno of the Holocaust and rebuilt their lives on Canadian shores. These survivors arrived in Canada as remnants of disseminated families. Some of them were sole survivors of large families who were brutally murdered just for being Jewish. Survivors arrived in Canada without family, money, or knowing the host country's language to rebuild their lives against great odds. We cannot overestimate the level of strength, perseverance, and courage that this took. The honorees have remarkably looked forward as they worked tirelessly to plant seeds of a better tomorrow from the ashes of despair and loss. After arriving in Canada, they started businesses and became volunteers, educators, and philanthropists, making their marks in all areas of life. In short, they sought to recover the sparks of light they had witnessed being expunged by the worst of humankind. With their strength and courage, they built towers and citadels of light, and their accomplishments did not go unnoticed, being awarded and recognized for their professional work and volunteerism, including the Order of Canada, Governor General Award, and honorary high school and university degrees, to name just a few. But they did much more than make their own lives better. many sought to transmit their wisdom to others, speaking to thousands of students, adults, educators, and their own families about their stories. They traveled abroad to Israel and Europe with hundreds of teens and adults on Holocaust educational missions, and have published their personal memoirs in which they detail their stories in heartbreaking detail. They have sought justice by testifying in Nazi war crime trials and have marched with other marginalized communities in the province, standing up for universal human rights as upstanders. They are nothing less than heroes, beacons of virtue and courage who we can only hope to emulate. On behalf of the Consulate General of Israel, I stand in awe of Ontario's 300 honorees and say thank you from the bottom of my heart to those who have passed on and those who are still with us for leading the way towards a better tomorrow. Toda rabba.
The inferno of the Holocaust not only consumed the flesh of Eastern European Jewry, but more fundamentally, it consumed the faith of Eastern European Jewry. It was inconceivable in the year 1941 to think of Judaism without the citadels of Poland, Russia, Hungary, Lithuania, and so much more. Yet amid the ashes, paradigms of faith somehow emerged. They were betrayed not only by humanity, they were not only betrayed by the silence of the world itself, they were betrayed by God, they were betrayed by their own Jewish leadership. And somehow, these embers emerge in a post-Holocaust world with a resilience of faith, not only to build up their families, but to build community, to build up the state of Israel, and to build up Western civilization. No demographic has done more for humanity than the survivor. And when we think of their legacy, it is a legacy of life, and it is a legacy of deep, deep resilience. We thank the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem. We thank the province of Ontario for this great opportunity to remember what occurred during the Holocaust, but more fundamentally, to remember the inextinguishable faith and resilience of the Jewish people.
I was 13 years old, and I was building model airplanes when the war started. I was in the ghetto, nothing to do. You had to go to work, slave labor, from the age of 15 to the age of 65. So I was home, and I had nothing to do. We stole a lot of books when they told us to give up the books, so I was reading all the time. I read the world literature, basically, sitting in a basement up there, or in a loft where we hid the books. And then they announced we are making a school, a trade school. Schools were not allowed for Jews. No, Jews don't teach schools. But a trade school, okay, they will be useful later. From the age of 12 to 15, metalwork, woodwork for the girls, sewing and knitting. I joined the metalwork school. We were liberated in Dachau, from Dachau, the main camp of Dachau, my father and I, in 1945, on the 29th of April, and we were very close to death. My father was dying when we were liberated, and I was full of hate. I hated the Germans. Why are you thinking about them? Think about yourself. And then I remembered, I want to be an engineer. From the age of 13, I wanted to be an engineer. I started to study mathematics, physics, science, chemistry, very hard. And I took a course in electronics. I became a repairman of radios, radio repairs. They accepted me at university. I came home and I said, Mother, I'm going to university now. She said, you're not going. We want to get out of Germany. We hate to be here. I said, I know, but where are we going? Nobody wanted to take us. No country was willing to take Jews. My mother said, we are going to Norway. I got a job as a radio mechanic in Oslo, in the capital. And I went to night school to get matric so I could go to university in Norway. The uncle says, can't send money after the war. He says, come to Africa. I'll make sure your son can go to university. So my parents and I, because of me, got up from Norway, and we flew after a year in Norway, we flew to Africa. I learned English. 9 months, I got myself into high school, grade 12. I passed with very good marks English. I went to university in Johannesburg, South Africa. 4 years later, I was an electrical engineer, electronics. I was so happy. My father was proud of me. Wonderful. Everything is good. I came back to Rhodesia, to Zimbabwe, to live with my parents. And I am expecting to get a good job as an engineer, right? I'm entitled. No jobs for engineers. So I have to do something else. So I started a sound recording studio. We were recording music and concerts and black people singing a cappella, beautiful, beautiful songs. I had 4 businesses I was running. And when I was 30, I decided I have to find a woman I could love all my life. So I went looking. I had a good time looking, but I found her. My wife asked me. We've now been married 65 years. We are still in love, so it's not bad. I had good instincts. In 1958, I got married, and we soon had 3 children. And now we have 6 grandchildren. And I started to campaign that the family should get out of Africa. I said, it's not going to end well here. There's going to be murder and blood and a war. Let's get out. So we went to Canada, Toronto. We chose Toronto, industrial center. Established a factory, electronic welding of plastics. Very successful eventually after a number of years. Another factory in Chicago. We did well. We sold it after a number of years. And one day, Zundel had a court case. And Zundel was saying, he wrote a book, did 6 million really die? And we were all outraged. We had a small group there, quite a big group actually, of survivors. We used to meet regularly. And we said, we have to go out and talk to the schools. We have to talk. So we started to call on schools and come to the classrooms and talk to them. And I haven't stopped. And I always tell the students, I want you to remember what happened to me, not because of my history, but because of your future.
Before the war, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was 100. Only survived 10. So I left and tried to come. In France, I learned to be a ladies' designer for clothing. And I came to Canada, where I got the less pay, but I figured that would be the best place to bring up children. And I was right. My first accomplishment was after 5 years in Canada, I became a citizen. And it was very, very emotional for me. I felt, at that point, I felt like a human being. I have a passport. And I had tears in my eyes. So the judge asked me a question, why? So I told him my past, and I picked the country. And now I'm a human being. I have a passport. I can be counted. When I go out of the country, I show I'm a Canadian. Now it's a future. You have to live for your children. I am clean now. I have no hate for anybody, because hate is a destruction of the person who hates, not the one who hates you. It's teaching the children is a big job. It's not just to show the good thing, is go show good things, what people did. Don't show just the bad things.
My name is Catherine Fife, and I am the MPP for Waterloo. It has been an honour to be part of the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem's Ontario tribute to Holocaust survivors in the past. Beginning in 1993, in partnership with the Ontario government, the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem has recognized the achievements of close to 300 Holocaust survivors who came to Canada following the Holocaust. Upon liberation from the terrible atrocities in Europe, Ontario became home to thousands of Holocaust survivors, where they built beautiful families and significantly impacted the communities in which they live in or had once lived in. It was not without tremendous hardship and trauma that these Holocaust survivors thrived and contributed greatly to our province of Ontario. The Ontario government is proud to have honored these Holocaust survivors who have become an instrumental part of the rich tapestry of our province through their professional footprint, committed volunteerism, generous philanthropy, and dedication to teaching others the critical lessons of the Holocaust. These Holocaust survivors have witnessed the worst crimes of humanity, and despite their unspeakable loss and suffering, came to Ontario and decidedly looked ahead, laid roots, built networks and community, and raised a new generation with a hopeful future of Jewish peoplehood.
You know, when you were going through it, we thought of our family, but we did not have the luxury to think about them and what happened to them. When you're suddenly liberated and you're suddenly free and you suddenly taste the sweetness of liberty, you suddenly start reflecting as to what happened to you, how horrendous the 6 years that just passed were. As I said, we were walking around and as in the days, just thinking as to what's our next step. Where are we going to go? Going to go to Poland. My father had a brother in Canada. We're going to go to Canada. We're going to go, to Palestine. Where are we going to go? We decided we're going to go to Poland to see who survived. I went to my grandmother's house. She lived in a big building. And I stayed there, stood there at the gate of that apartment, and I couldn't go inside it. Just like there was a wall that, I couldn't get through. I didn't have the strength to put my step into the house, because I knew that once I take that step, I'll find out who is going to survive, who survived. The last thing that my mother said to us when we were on a train to Birkenau, Auschwitz, whoever survives goes to her mother's neighbor and registers, leaves word where they are. Then my father sent a letter to my uncle, which was prohibited, but he sent it anyways. He sent it to Detroit, and his mother sent the letter over to my uncle in Toronto, addressed Leipziger Beatrice Street. That's it. And it got to him. And then he sent us papers, and then we were refused. Twice we were refused by the Canadian consul because of the none is too many situation. And finally made it in 1948. My father really died in 1972. Until 1972, my father was the spokesman. So when somebody wanted to speak, my father would be the one that spoke. And I was just sitting there listening and learning a lot of stuff that I didn't know until he told me. And that's when I started. So where do you start? So the first thing that occurs is that really it was in the adult world, we consider it discrimination. But in the kids' world, it is bullying. And bullying starts at public school. So you have to start teaching the kids what it means bullying, and how does it feel to be bullied, and how do you stop the bully. So really what you're starting to teach with the Holocaust is humanities, is human behavior, and the choices that people make that determine whether you are the victimizer, the victim, or the bystander. That has to be done early on. That the only thing that is positive is the term acceptance. And not just acceptance, but mutual acceptance. Okay? You will accept me as a Jew, as a Christian, as a Muslim, and we're going to live together. We're going to learn from each other. We're going to find what the best part of all of our religions are. We will elevate the humanity into a level where the Holocaust cannot happen. You have to convince the public that that's the case. And that is not on the shoulders of the survivors, it's on the shoulders of you and your children. So it is a continuous struggle to educate the public of the wrong propaganda, the wrong accusation. Holocaust was not a Jewish problem. It was a human problem. Humanity failed itself. All of that education, all of that knowledge could not stop Holocaust from happening. That's why the Holocaust is important. It is a lesson in humanities. You know, I'm 95 years old. It's 75 years since I came to Canada. You know, it's 78 years since I was liberated. It was 80 years since I was incarcerated in Auschwitz. You know, nothing has changed. Not a good picture, not a nice picture. But yet, we're here. We thrive with all the difficulties. I talked to the kids in the barrack in the Auschwitz, and I said, kids, we've finished running. We're not going to run anymore. We are going to stay where we are because we have the same human rights as every other human being on this globe. And nobody can take that away from us, and you have to fight for your right as a human being to live in the country that you choose to live in. You have to stand up and say, I'm a proud Jew, I'm a Zionist, and I demand my rights. That's what we have to do. And the kids stood up and they cheered because they understand that language. So I'm not worried about the fact that the last survivor is not going to be around. I'm leaving when we leave the world finally, we're leaving it in good hands.
I had the great honor for the past 20 years of having Martin Maxwell, Zichrono Livracha, to come and speak each year to our bar bat mitzvah students. Sadly, I can no longer have him come and personally tell his stories of heroism and bravery. But I remember one thing he always told the kids, that by you hearing my story, you become a witness. The importance of hearing these stories today is that you too are now a witness to the horrors of the Shoah, that it should never, ever happen again.
My name is John Fraser, and I am the MPP for Ottawa South and the interim leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. Like many of my colleagues in the Ontario legislature, I feel privileged to have been part of the Ontario tribute to Holocaust survivors alongside the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem. And I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to learn about several of the Holocaust survivor honourees. Following the Holocaust, so many survivors tragically came to the realization that the whole of families and communities had been decimated by the Nazis, with nothing but hope for their future. Some with their children or displaced family members, and simply the clothes on their backs, survivors came to Canada to seek refuge and the opportunity for a fresh start and a safe haven. Many pursued education starting from scratch. Marrying and burying children became priorities for many, searching with hope of reconnecting with family and realizing the need not to just survive, but rather to thrive and succeed became vital to their very being. Holocaust survivors that have been recognized by the government of Ontario and the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem have strengthened our province professionally in the fields of science and medicine, law and business, arts and culture, engineering, building and real estate, politics, and other notable areas of practice. Their hard work and perseverance overcome their loss, simultaneously supported the growth and fortitude of this province that they came to live in. Spanning 3 decades, the Ontario government has been a proud partner in identifying the tremendous accomplishments of Holocaust survivors in this province. Premiers Doug Ford, Kathleen Wynne, Dalton McGuinty, Ernie Eves, Mike Harris, and Bob Ray played significant roles in assuming the responsibility of honoring the positive impact of Holocaust survivors living in Ontario by recognizing both the horrors of the Holocaust and its aftermath, as well as the strength and courage demonstrated by those who survived and started again in a foreign country. Thank you.
I got married in Theresienstadt where I met him. As I said, yeah, to me, even then he seemed dashing and handsome young man. And we were married by the chief rabbi of Denmark. And not our chief rabbi of Denmark was an inmate. So it was a great love story. But, you know, for both of us, being realists, we thought this is a great love story at the doorsill of death. We never thought we would survive. Nobody thought future. The day of the liberation, I experienced in Theresienstadt when the Russian army pulled in, and all of a sudden we realized that the war came to an end. So the feeling was indescribable. I remember distinctly that I was trying many times to isolate the emotion around it, but it's not only a surprise and a shock, and it was a fantastic experience that, you know, a feeling that there is a God. There is not an end to it, because we all, for years and years, lived in anticipation to die. None of us really thought we'll survive. So it was a day of contradiction. High joy, a miracle has happened, and of course the reality. For years we lived in this death dance between and then all of a sudden you are free. You are reasonably recuperated, go home. But we don't have a home. So do you have anybody? So we tried, but this era was so difficult emotionally to come to terms that we've lost everything. I don't think I would have even gotten out of it if I didn't have this little diary of my mom. She wrote in camp, and I found after her death what to do with my life. And I can tell you, if I wouldn't have had that, I don't know if I ever would have generated the strength. Not only can give me the strength not to disappoint her, but also kind of order, try harder, don't give up, because that's what she kept on repeating. So this is what was the end of the war and the beginning of new life. So eventually, you know, in 1948, the United Nations partitioned Palestine, and Israel became into being. Most of people went there. Is the hope that this is a new beginning, this is a new chance, this is a new for to live for. And eventually we left Czech Republic and went for Israel, 1948, when the state was, because we immediately had where to go. Up until then, no state ever wanted anyone of us. It's all my love and affection for that country. It was a very big challenge, because the mandate power, the British, left everything to the Arabs, and Israel said nothing. You know, and we were sent to camps which were consisted of tents. So we were in Shar Aliyah, St. Luke's, which was in Bat Galim, and an endless row of black tents in a parching heat, no water, nothing. Israel was a very dangerous place, a very poor place, but you know, we believed and still believed it was a home. So we tried very hard, but you know, after a while you will see that the health and strength is demanded much more than we really had. So we have eventually left Israel, but I would think that we had some wonderful years, because all of a sudden we had a purpose. But you know, he had here in Canada, mother and sister, merit system. And at that point, I believe it was Prime Minister Lester Pearson who established the Family Reunification Program, so we qualified. So we actually planned, Arthur and I, that we will recover here for 5 years and we will return back a little stronger, a little better off. Of course, it never came to it. So we came in 1961 to this country. Canada is a free, democratic country run by law. You know, you do not find exploding buses on your street, you do not find bloodshed anywhere. You find a civilized life. I started to moonlight in the court of law as a court interpreter and translator for several languages, for which I had to pass exams. And at one time I was having the case, and I was waiting for my case to be called, till I hear somebody, there's some person who was questioning if the Holocaust did occur or did not occur, and the lawyer of that accused was badgering the witness that if you were not in the gas chambers, how do you know it was gas chambers? It went on and on. So I said to myself, what is that? So I inquired. The accused, Holocaust denier, was a certain German national by name Zundel. And so I came home and talked to my husband about it, and I said, you know, nobody seems to be doing anything about it, but I will. So he said, what can you do? So I wrote my books, and my story and story of my relatives and other things. And then I decided that not everywhere is the written word appreciated. So spoken word in schools will be. So I volunteered to the Holocaust Education Center, so I visited other organizations to volunteer to speak to interested public. And I can tell you the public is interested. So I think that is a very good idea that the government of Israel, of Canada, is now trying to implement it in their curriculum when they are from grade 6. It should be an event in the history of mankind of uniqueness and perpetuated to the teaching from generation to generation up until you see that the illness of hate or discrimination is eradicated.
I was born in a convent hospital in Sandomierz, Poland, and from there the arrangements had been made for my mother and I to go to this farm family in Poland near Sandomierz and be hidden, raised as a Catholic. And I had to be weaned from Catholicism because my parents, they survived Nova Shalom, and so every time I went by a church or something I had to go in, I would, you know, so only when I got to Canada in 1958 did I start to become assimilated to Judaism as opposed to, you know, Catholicism. I consider myself somewhat of a secular Jew, but I also have a very strong affinity to Israel. Affinity to Israel also led me to get involved in like Yad Vashem, Bakerest, you know, some of the other Jewish organizations. With the survivors that are still here, with organizations Yad Vashem, you develop a curriculum, and that's what you use to continue the education. And I hope that this is just the beginning, you know, with grade 6, and that progresses to be in a curriculum in more grades than just grade 6.
My name is Gila Marto, and I am the councillor for Ward 5 in Vaughan, and a former MPP for Thornhill in Ontario. It was a great pleasure to be a part of the Ontario Tribute to Holocaust Survivors in the past, and I feel honored to have learned the incredible stories of Holocaust survivors in the process. As prominent Holocaust survivor, educator, and author, Elie Wiesel famously said, "Whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness." This is true for all the children, adults, and communities who have listened to the first-hand accounts of Holocaust survivors, and true for government officials, including myself, who have heard those testimonies and so too bear the responsibility of sharing their legacy and never forgetting. Not only have Holocaust survivors thrived professionally in several disciplines, but they have also given back to the province personally with unparalleled generosity and community service. Holocaust survivors in Ontario have been at the forefront of Holocaust remembrance and education through communicating their own personal history with youth and adults in schools, churches, synagogues, libraries, and in communities all over the province. These Holocaust survivor educators continue to share their harrowing descriptions of violence, loss, hunger, and suffering to teach others the important lessons that come from the Holocaust. Despite the difficulty in mentally revisiting these horrific times, they bravely share their testimony as a cautionary tale of history repeating itself. Many Holocaust survivors have traveled across Ontario, Canada, and the world to share their stories to ensure future generations understand the dangers of anti-Semitism, hate, and intolerance. Furthermore, Holocaust survivors have taken the time to record their accounts through memoirs with the assistance of the Azrieli Foundation's Holocaust Survivor Memoirs program. These memoirs will help to sustain Holocaust remembrance and education for generations to come. In June 2023, Toronto opened its door to the Toronto Holocaust Centre, a powerful and moving museum exploring both the beautiful lives of the Jewish people before the Holocaust, the atrocities during the war, and the lives built in Toronto following the war. It is a tribute to Holocaust survivors who settled in Toronto and spent decades educating others about the Holocaust, an unprecedented and industrialized attempt at eradicating an entire peoplehood.
My mother or my father, they escaped to Russia. And they really didn't know. It was not like today with telephones and this. They didn't know who stayed, who was able to survive, and so on. So we were in Russia 5.5 years. Then we came back to Poland, Lodz, where both parents had relatives. When we got there, nobody survived. They started to talk about it. In the beginning, they didn't, because it's very hard to lose the whole family. My father had a cousin here, and we came from Israel, and we were there, I think, about 10 months. Well, it was December 29th, 51. For 3 days, I think, we lived at my father's cousin. And then we rented a flat on Major Street. I met my husband. I was about, 14 and a half. And we were just a bunch of greenies. And we met. And we started going. I was 15.
And how old were you when you got married?
17. I have 10 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. I think my family seems to have the knowledge of what happened. I don't know how much, and even myself, I was in it, but I was too young. So we all have to do all we can. We have to teach them, because anti-Semitism is on the rise. It has to be taught in schools. And I don't even think in the private schools, in the Yiddish schools, they don't teach enough about that. You go to every country, everyone hates Jews. We have to stand up for our rights. So I'm afraid for the next generation, what's going to be here. And not only here, like you say, it's all over the world.
I was liberated in Theresienstadt on the 8th of May 1945 by the Russian army. So at the age of 14, I decided I want to be independent. And I told the agency that was looking after us that I want a family, I want a board with a Jewish, reasonably Orthodox family, and I'm going to go to work. I was in Israel for 5 years. And as you heard, I worked, when I left the army, I worked both for Yad Vashem and built Yad Vashem. And I went back to England because I met Dorothy, my wife, and I wanted to try and educate myself. So I started going in the evening to classes, but money, I saved some money in Israel, quite a bit of money, and she was getting some money from her parents. And then our first child was born. And an uncle of hers came from Brazil, and he said, Brazil is a golden Medina. Gold is Wasser on the streets, So why don't you come to Brazil? So I said, okay, we'll go to Brazil. Brazil was just as bad as South Africa, except the constitution was okay, but blacks and coloreds and Indians were treated just as badly, as there was just 1% of the population, the white population, that had everything. It wasn't really a place where I wanted to be, and eventually I finished up in South Africa. So I lived in South Africa for 20 odd years. I never liked it, and I always wanted to leave. I decided time to leave South Africa, and I went first to the United States, and I decided that the United States was not a place for me. It wasn't a place which I felt that I wanted to bring up my children. By chance, my brother-in-law lived in Canada. He emigrated in '68 to Canada. And by chance, I came to Canada. I walked around and I started breathing, and I was breathing air that was free. I felt this is a freedom. This is a place of freedom. It was a revelation that there is a country of refuge. To me, it was a country of refuge, a country where people who were refugees could actually make their home. This is my home. I made it my home, and here I feel free. I never spoke about my story because I suffered too much. For the first 10 years after the war, I didn't even think about Holocaust. And I started having all kinds of terrible nightmares and things, and I started suffering from Holocaust. In 92, 93, I made the first documentary for Paula Draper for the Neuberger. And that's when I told my story from the beginning. In 2002, I was persuaded by Stephen and by Dorothy, my wife, that I should take the family to Poland. So we went to Poland. And it was a frightening experience, but it was also cathartic because I went to Majdanek and I could say, Kaddish and Eilmol Rachamim at that mountain of ashes where my father, mother, and twin sister are, their ashes are there. And then I was persuaded by Eli Rubinstein to start taking people to Poland, and that's when I started. That's when I got involved. And listen, the Holocaust is inside you. You can't run away from it. You just got to learn how to come to terms with it. So my attitude towards education is that first they should educate the teachers and try and get the teachers to be sympathetic to what they're doing, creating a climate which they are emphatically, interested in providing the kids with a real attitudes towards racialism, xenophobia, all these different things which are wrong. So this is what I think about the future. I think that the future, only by repetition and by education and by things like what the Ontario government has done.
My name is Robin Martin, and I'm the MPP for Eglinton Lawrence. I am proud to have participated in the Ontario Tribute to Holocaust Survivors over the last number of years. Learning the stories of these extraordinary recipients has been eye-opening, sorrowful, and yet uplifting, with a hope for a better future. MPPs across the political spectrum have participated and introduced Holocaust survivors year after year, and in listening to testimony, the Ontario government and its representatives demonstrated its own need for bearing witness to the facts and lessons of the Holocaust. The Ontario government was proud in late 2022 to mandate its first mandatory learning requirement in elementary school on Holocaust education in the grade 6 curriculum to help younger students gain a deeper understanding of the significance of the Holocaust. Prior to this announcement, the only requirement to teach about the Holocaust was within the grade 10 history class, focusing on World War II. This curriculum will be introduced into classrooms this upcoming school year. Yad Vashem is thrilled about this academic implementation and will be a proud partner in assisting where needed with proper pedagogy. Learning about the Holocaust begs understanding the rich diversity of the lives that the Holocaust survivors had in Europe before the onset of the war. Ontario Tribute to Holocaust Survivors honorees were born all over Europe and represent many cultures, languages, and countries of origin, including Poland, Germany, France, Ukraine, Romania, Hungary, Russia, among Jews in other countries that suffered at the hands of the Nazis and collaborators. Today, Holocaust survivors living in Ontario impact the communities they live in and settled in, including in Toronto, Hamilton, North Bay, Bracebridge, Ottawa, Kingston, and smaller communities around the province. Holocaust survivors have bettered the communities that they raised their families in, and for that, the Ontario government is grateful and acknowledges their achievements in a wide range of capacities. The Ontario government has been a proud partner alongside the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem in honoring Holocaust survivors in our province, and will always stand against Holocaust denial, anti-Semitism, and prejudice where it presents itself. We are grateful for the impact of these remarkable Holocaust survivors and have a deep respect and admiration for the lives they built and the communities they have touched upon arriving in Ontario.
My aunt and I survived the war. We found a relative in Canada, and they sponsored me. So my husband and I packed up. We were just the two of us, both. Yeah, he was 24, I was 23. Couldn't speak a word of English. And we came to Canada in December 1952. I arrived in Halifax. And my God, from the first minute I came to this country, I loved it. I don't know why. It was winter, and they took us, I took a train from Halifax to Toronto, and it was all white, and it was so big, and it was so wonderful. I don't know, the freedom of that country. I felt it the first day I came. The first time I ate that sliced white bread, too. I never saw it before. I don't know, we arrived in Toronto, and our relatives helped us to find a little room. Oh, we had that stove. My God, I was afraid it's going to kill us. An old gas thing. That country was right away beautiful for me. I don't know why. I loved it from the first day I stepped my foot down. And it's been good to me. It's been good to me. It let me grow. It let me develop. It let me have a beautiful family. They all educated. You know, I told you I survived with an aunt of mine. And her children are closer to my children's age, actually. And there was a simcha there. So we were traveling. I was in the back seat, and my son was sitting in the front seat with his wife. And I'm a talker. So I started talking, telling them all kind of stories. By the time we arrived in New York, my son turned to me, he said, "You know, Mom, I never had such a pleasant ride driving to New York. I don't know where the time went by. You're a good storyteller. Why don't you go to the Holocaust Center and start telling your story?" And he talked me into it, and I went. At first, it was very difficult. And I remember coming home and sleeping for 2 hours. That's how it used to exhaust me, you see. And then I realized, as I was getting feedback from the children, and how gracious they all were. One little girl said to me, "I liked your story," and I didn't even fall asleep. that she was complimenting me in a way. And another young man said to me once, he said, you know, I've read a lot about the Holocaust, but nobody ever brought the dead people to life like you did. So I realized that somehow I'm reaching those children, that they should open their hearts and mind. And maybe they'll learn something from one another, I said. I mean, you have dreams, you're young, you live in this beautiful country. Maybe all those dreams will come true. You dream about if you're going to find the love of your life, if you're going to grow up to be a beautiful person. Are you going to take my parents' advice wisely? My dreams at that age were, will I ever be walking the streets not marked? Will I ever be able to walk and not be afraid that a bomb is going to fall on me? Will I ever lose that pain in my stomach called hunger? Will I ever touch my mother's hand? Compare it, my dreams to your dreams. But you can dream them because you live in a country that's free. I'm leaving a legacy, so if they ever look at it, and they can hear my story. You see, I have one of my daughters, and she has my story, so she's going to be telling it. So hopefully the young generation will continue.
I came to Canada actually by a fluke because of my age. I was in England recuperating from the difficulties that we went through prior to coming to England. The Canadian government apparently reluctantly allowed orphans to come here, but you had to be under the age of 18. You had to be under the age of 18, you had to be an orphan. So this was in December, just in 1947, and my birthday was on the 5th of December, and the boat wasn't leaving, I believe, till about a week before Christmas time, and I just managed to squeeze in to be eligible. However, I had a brother who was 2 years my senior. He couldn't come on this transport, so we agreed between the two of us and all those who were looking after us, taking care of us, that if I don't like it in Canada, I'll be able to come back to England, and if I like it here, I'll be able to sponsor him to come. And on these conditions, I came to Canada. We were welcomed at the Union Station here after a long overnight journey from Halifax. And we were to be accommodated in a hostel on Harbert Street. This is where the Jewish Congress accommodated all the newcomers, especially the young ones. But my aunt came and welcomed me, and she was very persuasive, and I went to live with her. And that's one of the best things that ever happened to me, is living with my aunt. After New Year's, I came here before Christmas time. I got a job here in a diamond cutting factory. So one day, my son went to school at the Bialik Hebrew Day School. So one day he comes home and asks me, he has an assignment from school, and the assignment was to tell or to find out the background of the children who were attending that school, who were mostly immigrants too. So I says to him, Mark, I says, I don't talk about it. I says, just leave me alone. And, you know, I relented, and I told them, you know, that I had 2 other brothers, and I had a sister, and of course I had parents, and I come from Poland, and little odds and ends, and my brother and I are the only ones survivors from the Holocaust. During the war, we had a very tough time. We were in the camps, and it wasn't easy to survive. And whatever else I told him. And a little time goes by. He comes home one day with a school bulletin, and the whole story is in the school bulletin. Okay. And then, after a while, I got a call from, I forget now whether it was the school principal or his teacher. Would I come and speak about my experiences at school. I says, I am not used to speaking in public, let alone to speak to strangers, you know. But, you know, as time went by, I agreed to go, and I spoke to the class. And from then on, other teachers asked me to come and speak. And it was a novelty to me. And if you ask me what I spoke about, I don't know exactly. I don't know what their interest was. Or it was interesting for me to tell them to know what happened to me, not only to me, but others as well. When you talk about the Holocaust, what happened and how it happened, who was who in the events, then you have the Holocaust deniers. Now, that's the worst thing you can do to a Holocaust survivor. Tell them that this thing is all lies or it's exaggerated. That's the worst thing you can do to a Holocaust survivor. And what bothers me too, as I grow older and more astute, and these people are not just ordinary people. Some are ordinary people, but these people are educated people. And that's dangerous, absolutely dangerous. And this has to be taken care of. And this also brings out many Holocaust survivors to talk. The Holocaust has to be taught in whichever venue it is possible, starting with the schools. But also in history, it is a very unique event that happened, and we have to learn from it. We have to learn from it. And if it happened before, it certainly can happen again. That's my opinion, my humble opinion. So it is very important to learn about it, not because of us, but because of other people, because of the audience, because of the humanity of it. And with goodwill, I think that everybody can learn to live with each other peacefully, with tolerance, with understanding. I mean, we don't have to love each other, but we have to learn how to get along with each other.
What does it mean to live life that inspires? What does it mean to be inspired by that life? It inspires one to hold the memory of 6 million in one's consciousness, even when you're unaware of it. It inspires you to deeply connect to your Jewish tradition. It inspires the Jew to love life despite its adversity. My mother, who grew up in Kiev after the World War II, spent her childhood years only 15 minutes walking distance from the gruesome site of Babi Yar, where in 1941, Nazis, along with their collaborators, shot in a massive grave 34,000 Jews. Jews were gathered, stripped, and murdered. The huge ravine where this murder took place was not marked by the Soviets, but neighbors and Jews who returned to Kiev after the war knew what took place. One year, at the anniversary of this massacre, my mother, only about 10 years old, trailed after her oldest sister and her friends to the site of Babi Yar. There, among the trees, Jews hid and recited Kaddish over the ravine. Some just stood in silence. That year, in the fall, the rains were so heavy in Kiev, it flooded the streets and ran over to the ravine. It upturned the soil and the shallow sand, revealing what no child should ever see. What strength and courage does one have to possess to go on and not be consumed by it? Despite your pain and anger and flashbacks and undeserved guilt, you build the life worthy to emulate. You build your families and our Jewish community of Canada. Dear survivors and your families, you built our Jewish community of Toronto. You build it with courage, defiance, and wisdom, and an ultimate message for us all. L'chaim, to life.
Tonight, as we reflect on 30 years of honoring Holocaust survivors through the Ontario Tribute Holocaust annual event, we continue to reinforce our strong community partnerships with the Toronto Holocaust Museum, UGA Federation of Greater Toronto, the Azrieli Foundation, and like-minded community organizations to new innovative programming and a focus on new ways of looking ahead to the future of Holocaust education for a younger generation of learners. We strive to not only continue to share first account testimony from Holocaust survivors, but to further promote the role of the second and third generations of Holocaust survivors to ensure their legacies remain a future in universal modern history.
Till today, I volunteer wherever they want to know how these camps were run. I volunteer to explain it, because I think it's our duty.
So it makes an impression if you tell your story, not with the little details that are unimportant, which town, which place, what date, that's not important. It's how you felt, what happened to you, and that sinks in.
You know, you don't have to be a bully, or you don't have to kill the other guy in order to live in peace. You can all live on this world.
I believe that education of children is more important than anything else.
And I don't know, I hope the world peace is going to be peace, that my children can live in peace. That's all.